Breaking news tonight. The field of candidates is shrinking again as Ron DeSantis drops out of the race. With just one more full day for White House hopefuls to make their case to New Hampshire primary voters, 2 Republicans remain.
This has been a 2-person race for a while, and we're going to continue it.
We're leading by a lot.
A lot.
Like record-setting stuff. That's the way we want it.
Presidential candidates, including the Democrats taking on the incumbent commander-in-chief, will find out Tuesday where they stand with Granite State voters.
To you independent Granite Staters right now listening, do the right thing.
What New Hampshire voters decide to do on Tuesday will have tremendous import.
Setting the stage for the rest of the country as Americans decide who should be the next president of the United States.
This is a WMUR Commitment 2024 special. Countdown to the New Hampshire primary.
And good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this special edition of News 9. I'm Jennifer Vaughn.
And I'm Steve Botari. Primary week's here. Yeah. We made it, but the field is still very much in flux.
Just today, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis suspended his campaign. This happened just a few hours ago, endorsing former President Donald Trump for the Republican nomination.
That leaves just 4 major candidates campaigning still here in New Hampshire with less than 30 hours until the first votes are cast. Let's begin our coverage tonight with WMUR's Tim Callery. He is in Manchester, where DeSantis was supposed to be speaking with voters tonight, Tim.
That's right, Steve. Ron DeSantis canceled a meet and greet with voters at a restaurant here in downtown Manchester just minutes after announcing he is no longer in this race. The Florida governor will remain in the Sunshine State. His team telling us he is in Tallahassee tonight. Ron DeSantis was once seen as the most formidable opponent in this race to former President Donald Trump, the current frontrunner. I first interviewed Ron DeSantis at a campaign event in Hollis back in June, and he had a pretty decent-sized crowd. A long line of people waited out on a hot summer day. It even started raining, but there were a lot of people there eager to hear him speak. But over the course of this primary season, especially in recent months, those crowds grew smaller and smaller. DeSantis released a video this afternoon explaining why he was suspending his campaign. He says after his second-place finish in Iowa, he and his team prayed and deliberated on a way forward. They looked at what he could do to create a more favorable outcome here in New Hampshire, but ultimately they decided to drop out.
Now, over the past many months, Casey and I have traveled across the country to deliver a message of hope that decline is a choice and that we can, in fact, succeed again as a nation. Nobody worked harder, and we left it all out on the field.
DeSantis also thanked his wife Casey and their 3 children for their time and support on the campaign trail. Again, he says he is endorsing Donald Trump in this New Hampshire primary. Reporting live in Manchester, I'm Tim Callery, WMUR News 9.
And former President Trump stopped by his campaign headquarters in Manchester this afternoon, speaking with volunteers before he addresses voters tonight at a rally in Rochester. WMUR's Monica Hernandez is there with a preview for us. Monica.
Well, Jen, you can hear supporters here at the Rochester Opera House now chanting as that rally is scheduled to begin at 7 o'clock tonight. The former president expected to speak any minute now. We've already seen some local Republicans take the stage here at the Rochester Opera House, drawing cheers from the crowd when they talked about that endorsement from Ron DeSantis. The Trump campaign calling that endorsement a great honor. Earlier today, Donald Trump touching on that when he met with volunteers at his campaign headquarters in Manchester. It will likely boost his campaign. A UNH CNN poll showing that more than 60% of likely DeSantis voters listed their second choice as Donald Trump. He says he wants to win by a big margin here in New Hampshire.
New Hampshire has a great history with me because we came into New Hampshire really wanting and needing a win in 2016, right? Yeah. And we had that win, and that was a big win, and we won by over 20 points. And so I always have a warm spot in my heart.
And of course, we will bring you the latest on the former president's remarks here in Rochester tonight at 11. Reporting live in Rochester, Monica Hernandez, WMUR News 9.
And the other candidate in this now 2-person race on the GOP side is in Exeter. Nikki Haley set to speak momentarily at a rally at the high school where Judge Judy is also expected to be there to endorse Haley. Judy called the Haley candidate, quote, whip smart, principled and measured with strong experience as a governor and as UN ambassador. If you remember back in 2020, Judge Judy endorsed former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg in his bid for president. Meanwhile, Haley has been crisscrossing the state all week with Governor Sununu, who's endorsed her, doing her best to convince voters that she has the best chance to beat former President Trump and to beat the current president, Joe Biden. Earlier today, Haley reacted to the news that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has dropped out of the race.
You know, I think that he ran a good race. He's been a good governor, and we wish him well. But this has been a two-person race for a while, and we're going to continue it. We've got one more fellow we got to catch up to, and we're determined to do it.
Is this a speed bump? What would you call this?
No, it's not a speed bump. If anything, we went from 14 candidates to now it's just 2. And so, look, this is what we've been trying to do, is take out one fellow at a time. Now we've got one more to take out, and then we'll be getting America back on track.
So that was Haley at the UNH hockey game in Durham, and this is a live look at this rally about to get underway at Exeter at the school there. You can see the crowd's ready, and we're watching for the candidate to come out momentarily. We will bring you her remarks and analysis on that coming up tonight on News 9 at 11. Okay, so let's pause here. Take a step back a little bit and look at how this primary has taken shape.
Let's pretend it is January 2023, shall we? Let's bring in political director Adam Sexton, because really it takes all of this time, months and months, Adam, for these candidates to even think about setting up shop here in New Hampshire early.
That's right, Jen and Steve, a lot of road behind us. Right now, the polls make it look like Donald Trump could go wire to wire as #1 in this primary. But for many months, candidates worked here on the ground to make this a dynamic race.
Almost a year ago, candidates were still getting their bearings in New Hampshire, taking the first few months of this campaign to get to know the Granite State.
It smells really good, I'll tell you that. So we'll do it, okay.
In the wake of the 2022 Dobbs Supreme Court decision, abortion policy became an early discussion point.
So if that 20-week ban reached your desk, would you sign it?
20-week ban, definitely.
On the Democratic side of the race, Robert Kennedy Jr. brought a powerful family name and some controversial policy positions to the campaign trail. But he didn't stay long, opting to leave the primary to run as an independent.
I've done this for my whole career.
Former President Donald Trump kept a light campaign schedule here, appearing just a handful of times, but each time hammering the candidate he saw as his chief competitor, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis.
That he's heading. Question is, when will he go to third place?
In June, a key development in the Granite State. Governor Chris Sununu announced he would not run for president.
This isn't about us. It's really about the Republican Party and ultimately the country.
Others saw equally high stakes. Former Vice President Mike Pence, whose campaign searched across the Granite State for some momentum, sent a message to the Republican Party. Delivering a major speech at the New Hampshire Institute of Politics, he warned against the populist movement of the GOP sidelining traditional conservatism.
When Donald Trump ran for president in 2016, he promised to govern as a conservative. And together we did. But it's important for Republicans to know that he and his imitators in this Republican primary make no such promise today.
Pence never truly took the gloves off against his former boss, but Asa Hutchinson and Chris Christie did go after Trump, Christie promising to track him down himself to confront him.
I was a prosecutor for 7 years. It was my job to find people and confront them. So don't worry about it, I'll find them.
But Trump eluded Christie and stayed ahead of the rest of the field too, remaining firmly in first.
Good morning, New Hampshire. Good morning, America.
In October, a new Democratic challenger joined the race, Congressman Dean Phillips.
This is about time for change, a new generation.
In December, Governor Sununu endorsed Nikki Haley, adding fuel to her rise in the polls.
We are all in on Nikki Haley.
Now, with the rest of the major Republican candidates out of the race, it's down to Haley and Trump on January 23rd.
And we have Dr. Nathan Schrader from New England College joining us now. And looking back at all of that, and New England College hosted a bunch of events.
We did.
You know, there was all of this process that goes into the primary, and we see everything play out. But all along, it was staring us right in the face. Donald Trump has a big lead. He still has a big lead tonight.
That's true. And I was thinking back to this a few days ago, that could we have predicted on January 7th, 2001, the day after the insurrection, that Donald Trump would be looming this large over the race and prepared to perhaps win the Republican nomination again with a significant victory here if that happens? And looking back at it, I find that the only answer is yes, that there never seemed to be a time when there was an alternative, a nationwide alternative to Donald Trump in the Republican Party, even at his lowest point after January 6, 2021. It now feels like it was inevitable because there just never was another option.
What about what's going on here right now? Ron DeSantis dropping out. Does that close the door a little bit more on Nikki Haley right now?
Well, I hate to say that closes the door on Nikki Haley because voting really hasn't started yet, except for the folks who've done it absentee or by mail because they're not going to be in the state or in their district. But I think it makes her job a lot more difficult. I do have to think there's some irony to this that Ron DeSantis just a week ago gave this speech after Iowa saying something about he'll never be kissing the rings and he's never going to participate in what some of the other Republican candidates were. And here he is today endorsing Donald Trump. And I think it's only a matter of time until we see Nikki Haley endorsing Donald Trump.
And Haley is following a very classic playbook right now. We see her doing the diner stops and all of those things, really almost kind of recreating what Governor Chris Sununu does. He's right there with her in a gubernatorial race. Is that enough, though, to really break the dynamic of being down 10 to 15?
So Nikki Haley isn't just running against Donald Trump. She's running against Donald Trump and his kind of the cult of personality that surrounds Donald Trump. That's the entire MAGA movement, the base of the Republican Party. All of kind of the energy and excitement. We just saw that video a few minutes ago of the Rochester, kind of the warm up of that. You heard the people there chanting, "We want Trump." It's really hard to match that kind of enthusiasm. But let's be fair to Nikki Haley. She is running a race that was going to be a long road to start with because Donald Trump is able to campaign, even though he's not the sitting president, he's able to campaign as if he's an incumbent. So this is a very rare race in American politics where you essentially have each party having sort of an incumbent candidate in the primary field that is helping knock down one by one potential opponents.
Yeah, something we've never seen before and may never see again. But there's another interesting twist to this kind of race, and that is you look at the polls, and most people say they would not like to see a rematch between Biden and Trump. How do we end up in this inside-out universe like this where it's happening, but a majority of people don't want it?
Well, what part of the deal is that Donald Trump has been kind of since he was president, head of the Republican Party, head of his figurehead RNC chair is in place, and the state party chairs tend to be more Trump people. Joe Biden is the head of the Democratic Party by default. Therefore, the DNC and the Democratic National Party sort of has fealty to him. So one of the things that happens with all that is the internal mechanisms of each party sort of line up with those candidates because it's their party instruments right now, right? And the other thing, voters may be wondering out there, we don't necessarily want these two, but the question is, who else can win those nominations? And right now, we've not seen in the course of the last year that this race has really been running in earnest, anybody emerge that could topple either of them within their parties. So even though voters collectively say, we don't want that rematch, Republicans are saying, yeah, we want Trump, we don't want Biden in the race, but Democrats are saying, we want Biden in the race, we don't want Trump in the race. They have different reasons for not wanting that rematch.
Right, a little bit of time left on the clock still. We'll see if Nikki Haley can pull off some kind of surprise. Dr. Schrader, thank you for your time. Jen and Steve, back to you.
Okay, and as Trump and Haley vie for those votes, there are also Democratic candidates challenging President Biden for their party's nomination. We're going to hear from them when we come back.
Now, the president is not on the ballot here in New Hampshire, but that is not stopping his supporters from pushing a write-in campaign. It is yet another unusual element in a primary tradition that always leaves its mark.
It isn't possible to take New Hampshire voters for granted or to use a bad time to take them for granted.
And therefore, what we start here in New Hampshire today, I believe must succeed next summer and next November.
Is this on? Mr. Green,
you turn on my
you asked for me if you would... I am paying for this microphone, Mr.
I remember when we couldn't find a microphone.